Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tropics Talk here on this Monday morning. Of course, tracking Tropical Storm Elsa. Lots to talk about. Let's get right to it. This is the 8 o'clock advisory, a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Elsa continues to move to the northwest at 14 miles per hour. It's looking a little ragged on the satellite presentation, to be honest with you, this morning. As we zoom in, as far as I can tell, and anytime you're talking about not being able to tell where the center is on the satellite presentation, it sort of speaks to the health of the system overall. But the center right, if you can see my mouse, right about there, still plenty of thunderstorm activity firing up in association with it. It's going to move its way across Cuba later on here today. Over the past couple of days, big question has been, what will the mountainous terrain of Cuba or perhaps Hispaniola, perhaps Jamaica do to this? Well, it appears the path it's going to cut across Cuba is going to be one that sort of helps Elsa out. High mountains to the east of the path, high mountains to the west of the path, in between fairly low elevation. So you see what the Hurricane Center does. Right now, 65-mile-per-hour storm makes landfall as a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm and then exits back into the Florida Straits as a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm. It's a thin area of land that'll be moving over, and again, the terrain pretty flat, so not going to do much for the Hurricane Center's latest forecast. And then the waters, once it emerges back out, plenty warm. They're warm now. It's why those winds came up a little bit overnight. And as this moves off to the north, it'll have a little bit of opportunity to perhaps gain some strength, to reorganize at least a little bit as it's in the Gulf of Mexico. That's what the Hurricane Center calls for. Keeps this under hurricane strength, but does go back to 65 miles per hour as it's nearing our coastline on Tuesday. Turning off to the north by 2 a.m. Wednesday, it's due west of St. Pete, and then making landfall on the Big Bend in all likelihood by the time we get to 2 p.m. Wednesday. Still wiggle room in the path forecast, but some encouraging news from the Hurricane Center. And most of the model trends have been showing this. The most likely scenario does keep the center of Elsa off of our coastline. We're not looking like a direct landfall now here in southwest Florida, though as of this latest cone, parts of Lee County and Charlotte County still in that. And remember what the cone tells you. The center of Elsa at 2 o'clock Tuesday could be anywhere from here, way out in the Gulf of Mexico, to a little closer to our coastline. And that is going to matter. We are on the sloppy side of the storm, so regardless, we're still going to see some rainfall from this at the very least. But I do think it matters exactly where this tracks. Certainly that's what the models are showing. The closer this gets to us, the better chance we have to get into the tropical storm force winds. The more of us get into the tropical storm force winds, and likely the more rainfall we see, the higher the chance for flooding. You look at the model plots, about half of these keep this within 70 to 100 miles of us, keep the center within 70 to 100 miles. A good many more are further out there in the Gulf of Mexico. And we'll look at three individual models here. The European forecast model in green, the GFS in white, and our ABC7 storm tracker model in yellow. I'm showing you where the center of Elsa would be by 6 o'clock Tuesday evening on all three. Our in-house model, the furthest out to sea, the European sort of in between, and the GFS makes the closest pass. And so perhaps not surprising, that's the one that shows the strongest impacts. Now, the wind field with Elsa is not terribly large. Look what's going on right now. In fact, I'll go ahead and measure this out for you. Right now, the tropical storm force winds per the Hurricane Center only extending about 70 miles out from the center. So as we're going to be on the eastern side of that, we'd have to be, assuming this wind field doesn't expand all that much, which I don't expect it to, we'd have to be within 70 miles of the center to get into those 40-plus mile-per-hour winds. And then you see the number being reported, 65 miles per hour, 65 miles per hour. That's in this little core. The strongest winds only extend about 30, 35 miles out from the center. So, again, while yes, we're on the eastern side where there is going to be more of the rain, more of the wind, we still have to get close to the center to get into those stronger winds. And when you look at, again, the different models, when you look at, first the GFS, that's the closest to us. Close enough that on this model, it does show at least tropical storm force wind gusts. Go through the evening hours tonight. There we are by 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Now this is showing tropical storm force winds for Sanibel, Naples, Marco Island. We advance that further. We're seeing wind gusts towards tropical storm force across much of the area. By 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, that's when the storm's making its closest pass, and those winds die down as we go into the evening. But, again, we go back to the 3 models. There's the ABC7 Storm Tracker model further out there into the Gulf, about 100, 120, 130 miles off to our west would be the passage on that one. Look at the winds this puts down. Nothing really to shake your stick at. Let's go back to that real quick. By 5 o'clock this evening, it's showing winds, 15, 20 miles an hour. Even as Elsa is making its closest pass tomorrow, it doesn't bring our winds much higher than 20, 25 miles per hour. Some of those green areas would be 30 mile per hour winds. But it does keep everybody below tropical storm force in its latest run of the model. I think this is a pretty good indication of where we stand for the chances of seeing tropical storm force winds. Highest chance by far and away right along the coastline. Spots like Sanibel, Captiva, Pine Island, Fort Myers Beach, Boca Grande. 60% chance on Sanibel right now, per the Hurricane Center, that we get into those 40-plus mile-per-hour winds, and those chances fall off quickly as you work inland. Spots like LaBelle, Immokalee, Clewiston, a 10 to 20% chance. That's it. In all likelihood, do not see tropical storm force winds in those areas. And then the warnings sort of reflect that. There's a tropical storm warning in effect, meaning those tropical storm force winds are expected along the coast of Charlotte, Lee, and Collier counties. Meanwhile, a tropical storm watch is in effect for parts of Lee, for inland Lee and Charlotte County, meaning the winds possible in the next 48 hours. Let's talk about rain. Same setup. Again, the furthest out to sea that I showed you of the models would be our ABC7 Storm Tracker model. It keeps the heaviest rain offshore, 1 or so inches of rain over land, nothing we can't handle. European forecast model stays a little further offshore. Now, on this model, though, it depicts an area of very heavy rainfall just offshore, a very sharp gradient. This is what we'll be watching for closely. Where does that corridor of very heavy rain begin to set up as Elsa lifts its way northward? Does it stay offshore? Do we get into that shield of very heavy rain? The European forecast model says no. The GFS forecast model says the heavy rain does move in here to southwest Florida. Look at these rain totals. 4 to 8 inches possible on this one. So I still think this is on the table, and like I said, this is still something we are definitely watching for. Do we get into that heavier rain? If so, we could be talking flooding rainfall, especially 41 to the coast in Charlotte, Lee, and Collier County. Still lesser inland, even in this solution, lesser rain amounts inland, even in this solution from that. And then storm surge. Think back to Ada last November. As that swirled up our coastline, we had onshore winds for hours on end, and we did see flooding, particularly at high tide. The tides came in about 2 to 3 feet above normal. I think this is a very similar track to what Ada did. I think it's a very similar outcome to what Ada produced. Minor coastal flooding at high tide, definitely a possibility, and some very rough seas. We're talking, as you look at the wave heights here, 10, 12-foot waves in the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. This is the European forecast model, too. There's 12-foot waves out there. Now, you'd have to get way out into the Gulf to see that. But by our coastline, 5 to 8-foot waves, not out of the question from this. So dangerous conditions, to be sure, on the waters on Tuesday. And then lastly, yes, there is a low-end threat for tornadoes as well. Anytime you have those rain bands swirling in, there's all the swirling winds around a tropical system, you can get some rotation in the individual cells of the rain bands. And so there is a tornado threat that we'll be watching for. So you definitely want to have a way to get warnings to you starting tonight and lasting through the day tomorrow if that were to occur. We wrap this all up into the overall threats, and the main thing we'll be watching for is flooding rainfall. And again, it all comes down to where does that corridor of heavy rain set up. Most models keep it offshore. Some, like the GFS, bring it onshore. And it's not out of the question we could pick up some high rainfall totals before all is said and done here. I think the chance for wind damage is on the lower side. Along the coast, 50-plus mile per hour wind gusts, I think, possible. But even that, we should be able to handle coastal flooding at high tide. Definitely a possibility. And then a low-end tornado threat as well. Again, impacts beginning late tonight and lasting through the day on Tuesday, even into early Wednesday. We'll be here around the clock now here at ABC7 tracking Elsa for you. So be sure you're staying tuned for updates. We'll have a full update coming up, more in the morning at 9 and 10, and then cut-ins each hour on the hour coming up all day long, followed by ABC7 News. Chief Meteorologist John Patrick, he will have the latest on Elsa 6, 7, and 11 tonight. Until then, I'm meteorologist Jim Dickey. Stay safe out there.